By the summer of 1944, the Third Reich was still fighting, but it was no longer winning. In the west, Allied forces had landed in Normandy and were pushing inland. In the east, the Red Army was advancing at a scale the German army could no longer stop. Cities were being flattened by bombing raids. Fuel was scarce. Aircraft were grounded. Entire divisions existed only on paper. Inside Germany's military leadership, something had quietly changed. This was no longer about optimism or final victory. Many officers now understood the truth. The war was lost. What remained was the question of how much destruction would come before it ended, and whether Germany itself would survive Hitler's leadership. For years, opposition to Hitler had existed in fragments. Some objected to his strategy, others to his grip on the army, and some, though far fewer, to the crimes committed in Germany's name. These men were not revolutionaries. Most were conservative officers shaped by tradition, discipline, and loyalty to the state. But loyalty had limits. By 1944, Hitler was no longer seen by many as Germany's protector, but as its greatest liability. His refusal to retreat, his interference in military decisions, and his insistence on absolute obedience were accelerating the collapse. And so, for the first time, the most dangerous threat to the Nazi regime did not come from invading armies, but from within its own command structure. The plan that would be used to challenge Hitler already existed. It was legal, it was signed, and it was waiting for a crisis. It was called Operation Valkyrie. Operation Valkyrie did not begin as an act of resistance. It was a contingency plan approved by Hitler himself, designed to preserve order inside Germany if the regime faced internal collapse. Allied bombing, uprisings by forced laborers, or the sudden breakdown of civil authority, any of these could trigger chaos behind the front lines. Valkyrie placed the response to such a crisis in the hands of the Reserve Army, a force stationed inside Germany rather than at the front. Under its terms, Reserve Army units would secure government buildings, control communications, and restore order until normal authority could be re-established. On paper, it was routine. In practice, it was powerful. A small group of officers realized that Valkyrie offered something no previous plot against Hitler had possessed: legitimacy. It relied on written orders, established chains of command, and soldiers trained to obey without hesitation. If used correctly, it would mobilize thousands of troops without raising immediate suspicion. The conspirators did not abolish Valkyrie. They rewrote it. Quietly, specific clauses were altered. The language remained bureaucratic and vague, but the intent changed. Instead of responding to a popular uprising, Valkyrie would be triggered by the supposed treason of the Nazi leadership itself, particularly the SS. Once Hitler was dead, orders would be issued in his name. The SS would be declared responsible for a coup. The Reserve Army would move to arrest party officials, seize radio stations, and take control of Berlin. Everything depended on speed and obedience. If units hesitated, the illusion of legality would collapse. If Hitler survived, the entire plan would unravel. But if the system responded as it was designed to, quickly, mechanically, and without question, the regime could be decapitated in a matter of hours. For the conspirators, Valkyrie was no longer an emergency plan. It was the key to ending Hitler's rule from the inside. By July 1944, the responsibility for carrying out the assassination had narrowed to one man. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg was not the obvious choice. He was badly wounded from earlier fighting in North Africa, missing an eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers on his left. But those injuries had placed him in a unique position. He now served on the Army General Staff and attended briefings with Hitler himself. On the morning of July 20, 1944, Stauffenberg flew to the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's heavily guarded headquarters in East Prussia. In his briefcase were 2 explosive charges, designed to detonate using a timed fuse. Time immediately worked against him. Because of his injuries and a last-minute interruption, Stauffenberg was only able to arm 1 of the 2 charges. Worse still, the meeting location had been changed. Instead of a reinforced underground bunker, it would take place in a wooden conference hut, a detail that would later prove critical. Stauffenberg placed the briefcase near Hitler and excused himself from the room. Minutes later, the bomb exploded. The blast killed several officers and shattered windows, but Hitler survived. A heavy table leg had deflected much of the force away from him. Stunned and injured, he was nevertheless alive. Stauffenberg did not see this. Believing the explosion had done its work, he left the compound and began his return to Berlin. From his perspective, the most dangerous part of the operation had succeeded. Hitler was dead. And with that belief, the conspirators moved to the next phase of their plan. For a brief moment, measured in hours, not days, the fate of the Third Reich hung on information that was not yet confirmed. The bomb had exploded, the orders were ready, and Operation Valkyrie was about to be activated. In Berlin, news traveled slowly and unevenly. Telephone lines crackled with half-confirmed reports. Couriers carried written orders stamped with official seals. No one outside the Wolf's Lair knew for certain whether Hitler was alive or dead, but the machinery of the state was already beginning to turn. Inside the Bendler block, headquarters of the Reserve Army, the conspirators moved quickly. Operation Valkyrie was activated. Orders were issued declaring that elements of the SS had attempted a coup and that emergency measures were now in effect. To most officers receiving these commands, nothing seemed unusual. The language was familiar. The authority appeared legitimate. Units were instructed to secure ministries, occupy key intersections, and take control of communications. In several cases, troops obeyed without hesitation. For the plotters, this was the most dangerous and most promising phase. Valkyrie only worked if it appeared routine. Any sign of uncertainty could shatter the illusion and invite resistance. But for a short time, the system responded exactly as it had been designed to. At the center of this effort was Berlin itself, the nerve center of the Reich. Whoever controlled the capital controlled the narrative, radio broadcasts, official announcements, and the visible presence of armed force. And in Berlin, the most powerful unit was the Wachbataillon Großdeutschland, an elite guard formation responsible for protecting government buildings and senior officials. Its commander was a career officer, a man known for discipline and loyalty rather than political intrigue. His name was Otto Ernst Rehmer. That afternoon, Rehmer received orders under Operation Valkyrie. He was instructed to deploy his men and, most critically, to arrest Joseph Goebbels, the Reich Minister of Propaganda. The order was clear. The authority appeared unquestionable, and at first, Otto Rehmer prepared to carry it out. Otto Ernst Rehmer was not a conspirator, and he was not a political thinker. He was a professional soldier, 32 years old, disciplined, and deeply loyal to the chain of command. As commander of the Berlin Guard Battalion, his responsibility was simple: maintain order in Berlin and protect the state. When the order arrived to arrest Joseph Goebbels, Rehmer did not immediately refuse it. He moved his unit toward the propaganda ministry and confronted Goebbels directly. According to later accounts, Rehmer informed him that he was acting under emergency powers and that he was to be taken into custody. Goebbels did not resist. Instead, he stalled. He insisted that the order was part of a deception and that Hitler was still alive. Rehmer was skeptical. Rumors were everywhere that day, and forged orders were not unheard of in wartime chaos. But Goebbels understood something critical. Rehmer was not an ideologue. He was an officer who needed certainty. So Goebbels offered proof. Inside his office, he placed a call to the Wolf's Lair and handed the receiver to Rehmer. On the other end of the line was Adolf Hitler himself. Hitler spoke directly to the young officer. His voice was weak but unmistakable. He confirmed that he had survived the explosion and that a treasonous plot was underway. Then he gave Rehmer a direct order: suppress the coup and restore control. To remove any hesitation, Hitler promoted Rehmer on the spot. In that moment, uncertainty vanished. Rehmer was no longer choosing between competing authorities. He was obeying the head of state, alive, present, and giving orders. He immediately reversed course. Rehmer ordered his battalion to turn against the conspirators. Key buildings were resecured. Communications were cut. Troops loyal to Valkyrie found themselves suddenly isolated or surrounded. By early evening, the balance of power in Berlin had shifted decisively. The coup did not fail because the bomb failed. It failed because Otto Rehmer believed the voice on the other end of the telephone. One decision, made in minutes, collapsed months of planning. Operation Valkyrie was over. Once Otto Römer switched sides, events moved with brutal speed. At the Bendler block, confusion turned into panic. Orders were contradicted. Telephone lines went dead. Officers who only hours earlier believed they were acting legally now realized that Hitler was alive and that they were exposed. Römer's troops surrounded the building. By late evening, resistance inside the Reserve Army headquarters collapsed. Claus von Stauffenberg and the remaining leaders of the plot were arrested by officers who only hours before had been their colleagues. That night, without trial, Stauffenberg and several key conspirators were taken into a courtyard and executed. Their deaths were meant to be immediate and final, but they were only the beginning. In the days that followed, the regime unleashed a sweeping purge. Thousands were arrested. Many were subjected to show trials before the People's Court, presided over by Roland Friesler, where verdicts were predetermined and humiliation was part of the punishment. Executions were carried out publicly and privately. Families were punished alongside the accused, reinforcing the lesson that loyalty to the regime was absolute and failure was unforgivable. This attempted coup, which had nearly mobilized the German state against itself, was erased in a matter of hours. The regime survived and hardened. Operation Valkyrie failed for many reasons, but none of them were simple. The bomb did not kill Hitler. The conspirators hesitated. Orders were delayed, countermanded, or misunderstood. And many of the men involved were bound by habits of obedience that were difficult to break, even when acting against the regime they served. But above all, the coup failed because it depended on legality in a system built on loyalty. The plotters believed that if they could present their actions as lawful, the machinery of the state would move automatically. And for a few hours it did. But legality collapsed the moment Hitler's survival was confirmed, and with it the moral authority of the coup. Otto Römer's role exposes that fragility. He did not uncover the plot through brilliance or investigation. He made a decision under uncertainty and chose to believe the highest authority he recognized. In doing so, he became the hinge on which the entire operation turned. After the war, Römer remained unrepentant. He entered far-right politics in West Germany and publicly denied Nazi crimes. In 1952, he was convicted for defaming the memory of the resistance officers he had helped defeat. Valkyrie endures not because it succeeded, but because it reveals something uncomfortable about power. On July 20th, 1944, the fate of Germany did not turn on an explosion or a battle. It turned on obedience and on a single phone call.